it's a challenging question. Let's think backwards. When you're often in a place, the first thing you do is look comparatively. Where am I vis-a-vis other people doing a similar thing? And when you do that, you kind of frame your customer set or your group within that cohort of people, right? And so what you want to do is get out of that cohort. You want to go to the next level. So what you actually have to do is put your eye on that next level of competition. You have to look up and say, how do I actually become as good as that person? And you start to say, okay, well, if I start to frame and position myself and I start to do things like that person would do, I want to move out of that cohort to the next level. So what would I have to do to be there? Because so many people get stuck in that kind of rat race or that friction point of being in that cohort or in that kind of pool. But you really want to be in the next, you want to be the best, or you want to be in the next level.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Medallion Excellent Podcast. Today, I'm here with Kurt Davis, a entrepreneur and author. And today we're going to be talking about his new book, as well as his previous experience in Silicon Valley as one of the global tech leaders. So if you are watching and if you're new to the Medallion Excellent Podcast, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're on Substack or Medium, make sure you interact there as well. We are an emerging technology podcast. We have a lot of guests throughout the emerging technology industry on our podcast, people from NFT space, blockchain, renewable energy, and so much more. So subscribe and stay tuned. So, Kurt, thank you for being on our podcast. So we met at Stanford when I was taking a class on branding, but I don't really think I know much about you outside of that. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I think it was a cool to meet you then, and I think we were both trying to figure out like the kind of build your own way in the world through branding, and I think so that was our common thread there. I was kind of building out this blog that I had done for years, which was really just around travel. As I traveled the world and worked in technology, I was very blessed to have such jobs. And so I started just to say, hey, look, I'm going to take all these things and share them with the world. And that's how I met you. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And so I was, working on that for a little bit, which was just kind of, putting together my travel pictures and some videos. And then, I went to Nepal, hiked Everest actually right after I met you, I think. And then I came back and I had been working on a book because I had always wanted to write a book. And I had this time in my life where I could do that. So I wrote my first book about my trip to Africa. And so I wrote that book. And then the pandemic hit all of a sudden. And I had been spending time in Tennessee with my family. So I decided to write the next book, which I had already prepared, which was about business development for startups, kind of a narration of a 7-year, 8-year journey I went through at a startup called Boku. And then I reconnected with my colleagues and wrote that over about a 6 months period. And then finally, as the pandemic came to an end, I got that out the door recently. And now I'm looking at the world post-pandemic, trying to figure out where to play there and how to make my impact. And now I'm kind of running a small company in the new world of work, I would like to call it, the high level. Yeah. So.
Wow. That's a tenured life that you had, tenured work history that you got. And you spent about 2 decades as a executive at Boku, was it?
Yeah, so it was about 8 years, and worked there for quite some time. Started off in kind of VP of sales type role, and then so did a VP of sales, and then basically during that time we sold to like game companies, all the online game companies. That then they morphed social games, right? So Zyngas and all those, and then we sold into Facebook, and we are a platform that connected mobile phone carriers around the world into one API that then sold to games, so that Zynga, for example, could charge people with their mobile phone bills, and so we end up having to do business development to do with the carriers, which was all over the world, as well as doing business development with social games companies, Zynga, Playdom, Playfish, and the like, and everybody in that ecosystem. And then one day, Apple and Google came out with their platforms, and we had to figure out how to do deals with them, and Microsoft as well. And that was the business. So it was doing deals on two sides of the equation, and constant business development. It had to be sold. It wasn't bought like many products, and that was the story.
Wow. So around the time that you started in Boku, you guys were doing like about small time sales, and by the time you left, you guys had transitioned into like $1 billion sales. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. So I still remember the first sale we did. We sold to this little company called Premier League Football up in, I think they were somewhere up in upstate New York. And the company was doing we did about $2,000 in transactions or something. And, or 1,000, something like that, or 1,000 in transactions a day or something. And so we made $100 or $150 a day. And Buddy and I, who worked here, we were doing the deal. We went down, we had a beer. We were drinking. We're like, yeah, dude, we got some deal. We got a deal done. We got the first deal done. And he's like, yeah. And he goes, it barely even pays for our beer. And I was like, oh no, we got a problem. And he goes, yeah, where are we going to get really big deals? And I was like, I don't know, man. Either we got to do a ton of small deals or we got to focus on some really big ones. He goes, well, hurry up and get all the small deals finished, and then we'll go work on the big ones. And so that's what we did. And so as we kind of, said, okay, here's all these small deals, and we closed, 40 or 50 of them in a few months' time. Then we went off and said, we got to go close big deals. And the whole team was realizing that was an issue. And it took a while to get there. These deals took 2, 3, 4 years. And investors had to support that ride. So.
And this is actually what your book is about, business development, correct? And about transitioning from where you were doing those small deals into where you eventually had to go in order for the companies to survive.
Correct. So that's the premise of the book. It's a lot of startups get to the end of their early adopters. Those are, usually smaller companies like yourself, tech focused, nimble, looking for a competitive advantage, using technology to jump ahead of their competitors. So they're going to adopt new technology quickly, and they're more nimble. And so that was the early adopters. It just happened to be the social games market and some of the mobile game companies at that point too. And then you have to transcend and go to the next level. And so you need a new product. You need something that's more sophisticated. You need something that's more global. You need a lot higher touch service and, probably a lot of engineers. And then you need to deliver a product that gets you to this much bigger scale. And that's the original, that original story came from Crossing the Chasm, that book, which was a very big book. And I always like to say, this is actually the next generation of Crossing the Chasm. Navigate to the Lighthouse is the next generation of bigger deals, transformative deals that you work on at the highest level to get over maybe even the second chasm, which is that deals with $1 trillion companies, right? So selling to the biggest ones in the world. So, yeah.
So before we go too far, what's the name of the book that you wrote?
So the newest one is called Navigate to the Lighthouse, a Silicon Valley Guide to Executing Global Deals.
Mm-hmm.
So it focuses on the lighthouse being that point across the chasm to get that one pivotal deal that will change your trajectory. And global deals, meaning you need a global footprint to execute those deals. And in ways, there's like two concepts there. There's how do you close big deals and cross the chasm? And the other concept is how do you do large global international deals of scale? And in essence, there could be two books. So some people actually asked me to write two books, but didn't want to do that at the moment. So put them all in one and can learn a bit. So
Very good. Yeah, I think I'm a serial entrepreneur, and none of my companies have hit yet. I think one of the reasons is because I haven't figured out how to cross that chasm as you're talking about. So, what are some of the common mistakes you notice that most startups make that makes it hard for them to cross that chasm?
Yeah, I think when you say something like that, it makes me think about what the chasm really is. Like theoretically, the chasm for a technology company, as opposed to a technology for a self-promoting entrepreneur who's trying to build, like maybe even a podcast to millions of users. Like, how do you get that jump, right? How do you get that next step? And so I think when you think about that. I think I think it's a challenging question. Let's think backwards. When you're often in a place, the first thing you do is look comparatively. Where am I vis-a-vis other people doing a similar thing? And when you do that, you kind of frame your customer set or your group within that cohort of people, right? And so what you want to do is get out of that cohort. You want to go to the next level. So what you actually have to do is put your eye on that next level of competition. You have to look up and say, how do I actually become as good as that person? And you start to say, okay, well, if I start to frame and position myself and I start to do things like that person would do, I want to move out of that cohort to the next level. So what would I have to do to be there? Because so many people get stuck in that kind of rat race or that friction point of being in that cohort or in that kind of pool, but you really want to be in the next, you want to be the best, or you want to be in the next level. So you actually should look upwards. So if you do that, you kind of start to reframe how you think about things and what you do, and start to pull yourself out of doing the same thing over and over again. And I don't know if that makes sense. So one thing to do is look at how you frame your competition and frame it to a higher level. And go for that higher level and do things that pull you out of that same area. Yeah, so I think that's like one idea. The next idea is you have to like realize that jumping the chasm takes time, and you have to have the long view. So you actually have to look out 12, 24 months and say, am I doing something that I need to be doing that gets me to that level? Because so much happens where you're taking the short-term view, especially when you're trying to sustain, you're trying to fund the business. You get caught up in saying, I need to sustain, I need to fund the business, but I really want to be out there. So I need to set that vision of starting to put 10, 20, 30% of my resources into getting to that next step. And so, today you only might put 5%, but then tomorrow you might put 10%. And then the next day you might put 15%. So as you start to reallocate resources are a lot of things. It's money, it's time, it's hiring, it's investment. It's anywhere to get yourself to that next level. And so so at our company, we are actually putting resources into, if we can get that deal, what will we need? Well, first of all, we would need a new product. So we started to slowly invest in a new product. Now, we didn't do it fast. We just started to build it slowly. Here's a few engineers. Let's build the prototype. Let's see if we can get some documentation in front of them. Let's see if we can get their feedback, right? So it was a gradual process that was measured, and it was risk. We had a risk, we had a kind of risk quantified. So that's also what you have to do. And so I think those are two big things to do is to say, who's my competition, and then how do I allocate resources to get myself to that next level, and then making kind of the third thing I would say is kind of making educated bets, right? So you want to do your research, and this is what I call the lighthouse framework, which is the first two chapters of the book, which just talks about how do you analyze what you're looking at and say, what is my expected return, expected probability, and my expected return on that investment? So here's 50 different things I could go chase. Well, narrow it down to 5 and keep them churning and know that these 5 are the biggest ones if they hit. But if we're going to put 10% of our resources in that 5 category, because if they hit, it's going to take the whole, it's going to change the whole trajectory of what we're doing. And so you do put time in that, knowing that 10% has a very high probability of also going to 0. So those are the 3 things you really need to. So as a summary, the 3 things are, reframe your competition, look bigger, create your lighthouse framework, which is in the book, read the book on how to do that. So you make educated bets, and then provide the right resource allocation to those bets. So,
okay. So as far as making educated bets, as an entrepreneur, we know that's definitely a part of it. Is there a way to structure those bets so that, because there's always like a degree of failure involved, like there's definitely a risk of that failure involved in every single bet that you make. Is there a way to structure your moves so that those bets have a higher likelihood of paying off, or you just have to try it and see if it fails or not?
the question, repeat one more time, the question.
So whenever you're making moves and you're making bets, is there a way to go about those bets to guarantee that it doesn't fail, or to increase the likelihood of it not failing, or you just have to take the risk?
Yeah, I think what you do is nothing. I think this is from learning. It's probably just stupidity when I was younger, but you don't really need to go all in, right? Like I think a lot of stuff can be measured, and you can walk before you run, right? Like you can. What was it that? This old quote from Mandela or something like, crawl, you keep crawling, walk. You keep, you just, so crawl first and then walk and then, and then, but keep going, right? Like, and then till you think that, hey, you got to stop at some point. Like if it's not working, right? Like if you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. So, and I do this with a lot of projects now. Like I do it with lots of things. I plant lots of seeds, and then I see which one's working. And then I say, okay, like this new company I'm working on, planted a really small seed, crawled, walked, put a little more time, and now I'm jogging. And I'm not running yet, but I'm jogging. And there's very close to that. I can see that there's a sprint coming. Because if I let this thing rip, I'm going to let it rip. But this is a seed that we've been working on for a year, over a year and a half probably. So plant seeds, but push them along at the pace that you can. And then when you see, hey, there's a light, there's something here, then your educated bet becomes a lot bigger. As an entrepreneur, it's tough. I mean, unless you are very, very deeply invested in a space, deeply knowledgeable, maybe you've got a PhD in some type of biotech or clean energy or really cool battery technology, and you are like more knowledgeable than 95% of people, which is the bet that a lot of people take when you're investing as a VC, is like, you want to know somebody who's got something way more sophisticated. Sometimes though you're just a young kid and you're just betting on some young guy or girl who's got, a really good idea. But like, as you get older, you're trying to figure out, like, what is it that I'm really skilled in? But if you're not like me, I don't think I think I'm a really kind of a generalist, which is dangerous because that puts you in no man's land. Uh, if you're not a VC, um, you have to kind of say what seeds am I planting where I can be most beneficial to watering and nurturing those, and sometimes you don't know. So I think you water that, you nurture it, and you see how it grows. And I guess that's the best metaphor I can say.
Very cool. So everything that you're saying resonates with me because in building the startup that I'm working on, Medallion Excellent, I was going all in. I thought that was the way in order to go to the next level. It was writing blogs, and the blogs are a good way to like kind of build your audience in the NFT space. You have to kind of build a community before you release the product. So you have like a community of investors who are excited to engage in your product. So I was building the community, and I was spending a lot of money on marketing. And I think looking back, I probably should have held off on spending all that money, because it turns out that like I was pretty much spending money on bots, right? I was spending money on, bots who it seems like they're interacting with your material, but they're actually just like robots. So, I kind of looking back, I wish I would have kind of tried to organically grow the community, which is kind of what these podcasts are doing right now. They're more organically growing the community and getting our name out, but also educating people by providing, these interactions with people like you and various other business leaders. So you are also an investor in various Silicon Valley, Europe, and Asian startups. Is that correct? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I've dabbled here and there. I'm not an active investor. I think it's very dangerous to play in the investing game if you're not an investor. I mean, I'll make a few bets in people that I know or companies. They're usually small. Right now, I'm really focused on the southeast of the U.S. So if you look at the Appalachian area or the kind of homeland American area, that's been hard, mostly overlooked. So my investments are focused on that area. I'm working with a fund there called Shelterwe. So that's kind of my main area. I do have like an investment in a social company in Kenya, which is in a refugee camp. They're actually doing quite well, and the CEO is a really smart engineer, and he's built some really cool stuff there called Kakuma Ventures. And then I have a little bit of investments, one in Ghana, Texas, and then, like I said, some of these little companies around the southeast, but nothing much, like maybe 5 or 6. So,
okay,
it's
so
really it's an afterthought.
Okay, so that's not like your main focus. All right.
No. And I looked at doing some more of that, but I decided when this opportunity came along to build something, I decided to build again because, I like the idea of building and creating something from new is really artwork, and that's like kind of sometimes the most impactful thing you can do. And it's also the fun with working with people and growing in a company fast and leading. And I think, that sounds, fun. This is a chance. This company that I'm working with now is a chance where you could really grow really fast. Like we could really be one of these things that explode. And, I'm excited for it. And that's why I decided to do it.
Cool. Well, going back to your book, how do you identify the right people to bring aboard like a new venture? Because investing in people is obviously like one of your biggest bets, right? Like if your bet goes wrong, they could tank your entire company. So how do you make that decision?
Recruiting and hiring, I think is going to be a challenge over the next few years. I think the first thing you really need to know is what you're hiring for. So the first most important thing is what, right? Like what's this person going to do? I think so many companies just like, I need to hire, but you're like, you need to start with, what do I need to hire for? Like, what's the role? And that actually, like, once you write that role down, then you figure out, okay, well, I know what that person's going to do. Then you're very clear on who you need to go after. So then you find the skill sets align with that role. And do you want somebody who's kind of experienced doing that, or do you want to have someone who maybe fits the bill 75%, then is going to have to learn 25%, or do you want to find somebody who fits the bill 50%? So that kind of gives you an experience level. And also, like, how much can you afford, right? Like, if you're hiring a experienced Silicon Valley person, they're going to want to get paid. And so I'm out here in Tennessee and I can't afford those salaries. So I'm looking at a very different person. I'm looking at people who are kind of underdogs, who kind of have a real desire to build, have a hunger to do something, be part of a team. So that's where you get to the more softer skills, right? Like, what kind of person do you want? And I have a very unique person I look for. There's several qualities in people I look for, traits that make me, this is the kind of person I want to hang out with. This is the kind of person I want to talk to and work with. This is the kind of person that's going to go to battle, know that I'm gonna support them. I don't like to say battle because I think that's a war thing, but build something, or be on my team, right? Like go do something together with. So there's like personal qualities that I look for, and it's not Silicon Valley type stuff. I think Silicon Valley's terrible at hiring. I think they look at the wrong things. I can talk all day about the just asinine hiring tactics of Silicon Valley companies. Like, they're so stupid. Like, they don't look at just qualities people bring to the table sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, but I'll keep that to myself.
Go ahead. This is a 70-minute podcast.
No, I mean, I don't want to get into it. But like I said, it's like, I look for different qualities, and a lot of these are the underdogs and people who have been overlooked, and I'll value different things. Like, I don't really care where you go to school. I don't care. I like to see things like have achieved some type of academic qualification, whether it's passed some certifications or tests or dedications, knows some tools, or has an aptitude to learn and to want to learn. And those are kind of qualities that are more important to me, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to hire people who go to Stanford and Harvard and Berkeley and Duke, and they're probably not going to want to work for me anyways, because I'm not going to pay them what they want. So, it's a whole different animal I'm looking at, different person. Maybe one day, if we get funded enough, we'll have the money to hire someone who can really change the impact of our company, who's got lots of experience, 10, 15 years experience like I do. And then I'll bring, one or two of those people on who can do that. But for now, like, I can't do that at the level we are and what we're doing.
Okay.
And there's a humility involved that, I think, what is humility? I think that's a big question. I think a lot of people in the valley, we need humble people. Well, what is humble? Like, is humble the fake billionaire or fake millionaire? Is, I'm so humble, like, or is it the enthusiastic young person who's not necessarily coming across as humble because they're so enthusiastic and energetic that they really want to make a difference? I don't know. I don't even know what that word means anymore. So I think it's strange, but truly someone who's to me, like, it's got energy. I like it, the ICE. I call it the ICE. There's an acronym I use. I call it ICE. It's integrity, courage, and enthusiasm. Like, does this person show that they have integrity? Do they show that they're courageous, that they've done things that are unique and different and independent thinking? And are they enthusiastic? And do they come to work every day with an enthusiasm that bleeds over, that is contagious to others and builds up the whole organization? So, I mean, that's a really fine, easy way to look at the type of person you want to be around.
Do you have any insights on, like, team dynamics? Like, as far as when you're hiring new people, do you expect them to, like, how do you gauge how well they're playing with others?
Well, I mean, team dynamics is tricky, especially in the world we live in, remote world. I mean, I don't know yet. I think it just, if you have a grasp of what a team is, and if you've been on teams, and do you know how to work with people nicely, and realize we're all in the same boat trying to achieve the same thing. And I think there's some basic things like that. Generally, I think, how much does teamwork get involved? I think, there's probably only a few people who really have to be very teamwork oriented, right? So, most engineers need to work together, but they also need to deliver. Salespeople need to deliver, right? Like, I'm not, I think there's a lot of individual contributors in companies, and that also makes a company go. So I think there's a lot of, people who don't have to work in a team environment. So sometimes teamwork's not essential for certain positions. Some positions, maybe a project manager or product manager, like, they have to be good at navigating different people and getting thought process together, and just working hard. But other times, like, I want someone to go chop down 100 deals. Like, I don't care if they're a team player or not. Go get your 100 deals done. Like, what do you need to get it done? Like, we need to deliver that, right? Like, the people behind him maybe need to be more of a team player than he does. So there's all kinds of combinations and personalities that fit in companies, I think. So I don't think there's always not everyone has to be a team player, and that's fine. But they do have to have the team, the mission, above themselves, which is important. But so I don't always mind if someone's, you can't be completely about yourself, but you don't mind if someone's really motivated and ambitious either. So there's combinations, I think, that work.
And since you have been an executive at successful companies, how do you think the best structure is from a top down perspective is, as far as organizational chart? Like, is there a combination that works as far as, like, the top down organizational structure?
I don't know. I think, I had some interesting 2 CEOs that I worked for, 3 CEOs, and I could tell you, by and far, the best CEO was the most hands off, and was the one who basically empowered his people to run and fail. Like, we're hiring you to do this job. It's your job. It's your job to fail. It's your job to succeed, right? And because they have a job too. Sometimes you forget the CEO's job is not really to manage you. The CEO's job, hey, he's got to go fundraise. He's got to work on partnership, or he's got to work on partnerships and fundraise. And there's a lot that person has to do individually as well. In the sense, if you look at the CEO, they're also an individual contributor to the company, not just a leader, not just a manager. Some CEOs, good CEOs, you're not good managers at all. And they need to hire good managers like CEOs to balance them, to make sure people are getting their work done. But, I think the best CEOs are the most hands off, and, give clear leadership or management objectives, and they inspire you to be the best you can be as well. So there's certainly a combination of types of CEOs. Now, the worst CEO I've ever been involved with was very hands-on. He wanted to be involved in everything. He wanted to have his hands in deals. He wanted to have his hands in knowing what you're doing every day. Like, I was like, back off. Like, I'll let you, the best CEO will say, if you have a problem, let me know. Like, let me know. And I think, when I operate, I'm very hands-off. I only budge in, if I feel like there's something not going to plan, or where they're not meeting their schedules, or it's impacting kind of what we've put together for our 3-month plan. And so,
what's the level of hands off? Do you think? Because obviously, you can't be 100% hands off. Like you have to have some level of involvement. Like, how would you gauge that?
well, it's exactly what you said. It's a gauge. And so each person, you have to assess on how much work dial the gauge. Does that person need 50% management, 75% management, 90% management? Hopefully, as CEO, you get a group of people who you only need to manage 5%, that who can basically run their own stuff, right? Like, I'm not telling our CTO what to do. We give a product roadmap. I get into the details, and he's got the know-how to execute. And I'm not, and so same with our UX designer, same with our salesperson. So it's how much do you have to dial in? And when you're hiring, back to your hiring and recruiting, you're assessing people based on how much you have to work with them to get them going. So that gauge is a very important factor. If you bring on 2 people and you're going to have to spend, they need 50% management for 3 months, you're going to have a lot of work to do to get those people up to speed. And that's the investment you make. So know the gauge, like you said, and you have to dial that gauge accordingly. But it also weighs into who you hire and probably, kind of, who you're hiring at that time to do those jobs. So,
okay. So back to crossing the chasm or navigating to the lighthouse, right? There was a point where you realized that getting these small deals are not going to pay the bills, but there's still a certain amount of small deals that you need to achieve, right? So once you've achieved those small deals, like how did you approach trying to close these large companies and getting bigger deals?
Well, I think those deals showed the potential of the technology, and having those were very important to building out the company, the technology, and the platform. So it was a stepping stone, right? I mean, this wasn't, a cryptocurrency exchange where you put Bitcoin and everybody bought it because they like gambling or some, really that's what it was, right? Cryptocurrency was just an online lottery. For lack of better terms. This was actually a technology that had to evolve, and that it had to acquire customers to drive the evolution of the technology. So those early customers were instrumental in developing to get to that next level of customer. So we needed them. We needed them to support the business monetarily. We needed them to give us feedback to go to the next level of technology. And so the more we worked with them, the better we got. So that early adopter set, or I think, in crossing the chasm, they call it the visionary, is very important in getting to the next level of where you want to go. And sometimes those people will point you in the direction you want to go. Like, oh, if you develop this and this, we could actually do more. And oh, by the way, there's other people over there who would actually want your technology too. So it's kind of funny. Like sometimes your early adopters, visionaries will point you in the direction you need to go. So the deeper you get with them, the better. And so you don't not invest. Like it's called harvesting. You harvest those customers, and you invest some of your time in them. So whilst early in the day, if your company, you're putting 100% of the resources in there, and as you see that coming to an end, you're still harvesting. You're still putting 50-60% of your resources in it because you're building new technology. You're still spending time on customer success. You're still getting better. And then you're putting 50% of your resources into new technology. And over time, maybe those customers are very happy and there's not much more you can do with them. So you're only putting 25% of your resources, but that's getting you still, 80-90% of your revenues. And then whilst you build towards something else, that those customer sets will kind of dissipate in value as a percentage of your overall customer set. So
Okay. Now, part two, like when you were approaching these big companies, like how did you prepare?
Well, I think it's like, how do you approach them? And then what do you approach them with? So, I think approaching them, yeah, sometimes you approach them with a very wide open mindset. So you don't want to come in too narrow. You don't want to come in with a kind of a direct shot. You want to say, here's who we are, here's what we do, and here's what we can do. And we have this kind of wide open ability. We have a lot of things we can do. Our technology, where you see our technology deployed, does this, but it can do this in lots of countries. It's actually got flexibility. What you see is not all we can do. You don't want to go in with a super narrow shot, because if you go in with a super narrow shot, they can easily just say, look, we don't need that. Right. Well, no. And you don't want to backtrack and say, oh, we can do this. Well, you want to come out with a very introductory feel. Hey, this is our company. Just want to let you know what we're trying to achieve. This is why we're approaching you. We think we can help you with X, Y, and Z. Our technology is very flexible. We can do a lot of stuff with it. We just want to have a open conversation to understand what your problems are, what your needs are, see if there's a way we can work together, adapt, be flexible. So you go in with that kind of mindset. And so they don't get turned off. They're not like, oh, you're coming in with a straight, one size fits all thing. You're kind of saying, hey, we can actually adapt. We can do what you need to do. And so then, you don't know which color. You don't know. It's like if you sell Apple's selling a variety of colors, a variety of different watches now, different myriad of products. And so you want to do the same thing when you sell to them. You don't want to go on with,
Okay.
Makes sense.
That does make sense. That makes a lot of sense. And, I'm grateful for this game that you're giving us, because I think that's what a lot of my problems were with my previous startups. So it's like I came with them with like, this is my addressable market. And you're either going to say yes or no. And I'm not just going to have to ask 10,000 people instead of like being a lot more open and giving them options. So that's very insightful and very useful information. And so once that happened,
well, I think can I riff off of that? I think what happens is I think a lot of people get into this mindset of, and this is what I think a problem with Silicon Valley is, everyone has to have a label. Everyone, especially I think the Stanford mindset, I think even to get into Stanford, they want to know you are this is the one thing you can do. Like, you're not allowed to do like 3 things. Like, they want to know your brand. I think it's even like the Stanford MBA. What is your brand? Like, well, you know what? Like, I like beer and I like wine. I like to travel. I like lots of things. I don't have to be like this one ultimate, but that's what they want. And so that permeates Silicon Valley. I have to be careful. And so like what happens then is that world, it says, then if you're selling something, you're saying, well, I can, I'm going to go after this one sales channel, this one exact thing. Then you don't give yourself flexibility to adapt. And that the world doesn't work like that. Like, nobody gets it right on the first shot. Like, that's just bullshit. Like, every company in Silicon Valley got it wrong on the first shot. Maybe Facebook didn't, but like Google did. Got it wrong. Like, I can go to the list of every company that got it wrong. Maybe Dropbox got it right at the first. Like, I don't know. But like most of them don't get it right, and they adapt. And so like when you're thinking about selling and talking to people, I highly suggest you think about what your skills are and your strengths are, and sell to those rather than the absolute one thing you have that you've built, because you can do more than that, right?
So flexibility. That's
well, in software, B2B software sales, for sure, that's important.
Definitely.
But even as a startups get it wrong all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So going more into flexibility, like in that approach where you just kind of present them with the options. Like, is there some sort of I guess, I'm trying to remember what it is, but it's like when you give them like half off, or is there some sort of deal that you give them to like try you out to kind of ease them onto your product system? Or is it just like what you see is what you get? Like, how do you approach like the transaction portion?
Well, I think what I'm hearing you ask is what's the difference between a standard sales deal, which I call a shrink wrap deal, and a business development deal? And in a standard sales deal, you have a product that has kind of been defined that your sales team sells over and over and over within a price point, within a set. Here's this company, here's this product, we sell it, we've sold it, here's the price. Sometimes we give a trial, sometimes we give a free promotional period, give it a shot, go for it. Like Box or Dropbox or, MailChimp, something like that. But then when you get into business development, you're there trying to figure out, okay, well, we're going to deploy this thing over this massive set of customers. We need to really build this, but we need to try it. Now the conversation becomes different, because what you're trying to do is say, this is a multi-million, $100 million deal, but we need to get it tested out. So what you need to figure out then is, what is the easiest way both companies can test out the product without making massive investments? Because they still have this big company who's buying your product, might have the right, may still not say it doesn't work. So how can you build something or do something with them so that they can test it out? So you kind of create boundaries, right? So, you can use it with so many people. We'll develop we'll put in 20 hours of work, 50 hours of work in the sandbox. We'll allow you to access this much. We'll allow you to do this. Like anything in life, you set some boundaries. And then you let them try it. And I think one of the tricks that one of my friends gave me was one of the tips in the book. Nicholas Reedy said, you always want them to try the entire product. Like, you want them to taste it fully to really get the experience. Because once they get that experience, they're going to want to buy it. So you don't want to actually it's like you don't give them the unsweet tea, you give them the sweet tea. You give it all to them, so they love it, so they want to buy more of it. You don't want to give them the unsweet tea so they don't like it. So give them as much as that experience as you can, but limit it and draw. Whether it's geographically limited, user-based limited, API calls. So if that makes sense, that's kind of what you want to do, and that's why you hook them, right?
It does make sense. Give them as much of the experience as possible, but limit it. And I can see that in
limit the usage.
Limit the usage, yeah. And I can see that in the way a lot of subscription companies are structured. Hulu comes to mind, for example, where they have like a free tier, but in that free tier, you get a bunch of ads, and it interrupts every like 4 minutes. And then they have a pay tier, which is less ads, but you don't get like as much features. And you have like the premium tier, where you just get unlimited channels and multiple like different interfaces that they plug into. So yeah, I can. That's very smart. That's very smart. And where like is a lot of these insights, have you learned it over time, or like the hard way, or how have you come to these insights?
Yeah, certainly we learned a lot at the company I worked at, Boku, because it wasn't an easy technology to sell, and it wasn't an easy technology to integrate. So the other company buying it actually had to spend hours and hours, and if it was a big deal, they spent lots of time integrating, months. So it was a big kind of push and pull. But I learned more of this actually as I started to interview people for the book. I started to get the other experiences, because the experience with Boku was somewhat unique in the fact that what we were selling was kind of strange and different. Whereas, most enterprise B2B stuff is sold in a different fashion. So as I started to interview people, I started to come up with, oh, it actually it's much different in the normal world, what people sell. And this is how they do it. Uh, so yeah, I think that's, yeah,
Yeah.
learned a lot
So
from other people.
yeah, absolutely. And Boku, I was reading up on it, and you guys started off with like video game sales, correct? Like
Mm-hmm.
small, I guess, what do they call them? Microtransactions? You guys were like one of the first pioneers of the microtransaction. And then as you grew and started selling to bigger and bigger companies like Apple, Microsoft, etc., like it started to pioneer more. And then now it's kind of used in third world countries as like a way to transact value. Is that correct? It's kind of like
Yeah, it's funny as you say. I mean, I can't. I have microtransactions. I remember that was the word. It's anything under $30 or something. Every country had its own limit of what you could spend on your mobile phone carrier. So, why would you pull out your credit card for a microtransaction? Just use your phone. It's real fast. Right? And it made sense. It actually did make sense for that, and it still makes sense actually. So I actually didn't put that in the book. I should have. I forgot. You think about so many things. It's like the obvious. The one thing that it was all about was the microtransaction. I'm gonna make a note of that. Put it in the next version. But yeah, and so that's why it makes sense is for people who didn't have credit cards, and that's why they don't do it in the U.S. So you don't need it, and so if you're in India, in Japan, where credit card penetration is pretty high now, but it was in Germany. They didn't do a lot of credit cards then, and Russia, and Western, Europe, a lot of the European countries, and I think Saudi Arabia at one point. So now I think the biggest markets are Japan and Korea, actually, where carrier billing is massive. It was a big thing early days, and it's just continued to. People just, you can bill up to. I think you can almost do like $500 on your mobile phone bill in Japan and Korea, like just boom, one time shot. So yeah, direct, and so like it's a different world. Like why wouldn't I just use my phone number if I could use it? So they've evolved differently, and that's why those markets were so impactful, beneficial.
cool. Well, I think we spent enough time talking about Boku. So during the pandemic, you went through a bit of a metamorphosis when you started realizing like all these new technologies and work itself started changing. How did that impact you?
I think I'd come back to help out my dad. I was actually kind of going through, after I came back from Africa, I was going through that kind of metamorphosis already. And I was thinking about what to do next. And, did I want to go back international, or did I want to stay in the U.S.? Decided I'd stay in the U.S. I could come back to the Southeast and start working on projects here. And then, parents fell ill, and so I came back to help out. And then the pandemic struck, so I was kind of in the middle of caretaking and trying to figure out what to do. So I was like, well, I'll just write. And I'd always wanted to write the book, so I finally finished the Africa book. It's called Finding Soul, so if you want to read about entrepreneurship in Africa. And then, sitting there like, well, a lot of friends said you should write this book about biz dev. Kept coming up, so I was like, all right, sat down and worked with a co-writer and got it done in kind of 4 or 5 months and put together. So that was that, and it was a lot of reflection, a lot of thinking, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of just learning something new, which was writing, how to tell story, how to get your points across. And I do that pretty well. I don't think I do it great, but getting better at it, like anything else, it's an evolution. But I learned a lot in doing that exercise, and then as we started to come out the other end, I was like, well, time to get the book released. So got the book released, I was trying to get it released a little bit earlier, but I missed the window. So we got it released this fall. And then I was like, what will you do next? And I really wasn't thinking about running a company. The opportunity kind of fell in my lap. And so I was like, well, I've always kind of wanted to run a company. So, but it had to be kind of right. It kind of had to be early enough stage where I could, hire the people I wanted and form it how I wanted it. I had to have decent support financially. I wanted to make sure there were some good investors. So we had a good handful of investors who were supporting it. I was like, okay, this kind of meets the requirements. It was in the Southeast, so I wanted to do something out here whilst connecting it to California. So I was able to do that. And it kind of just worked out. And I wanted to do something that could be quickly scalable. Like, I didn't want to do something where I was selling to big deals. I wanted something that had a natural momentum, a latent demand, and worked in the new world of the pandemic, post-pandemic world. And so that fit all the criteria. So I said, okay, let's just go for it. So we're doing that. We're going for it. And the Metamorphosis kind of evolved with writing and learning and self-reflection, reconnecting with people, and ended up in a new spot. So there you go.
So what is this new company that you're working on?
So it's called Byteline, which is not I don't think it's going to be the end story, but it's the current story. And it connects dental offices with dental professionals, hygienists, and assistants. So what's happened is that now with the pandemic, a lot of the dental hygienists and professionals quit because they didn't want to necessarily be around people's mouths during the pandemic, and then decided to want to work temporarily or work as they wanted, part-time, come and go. So they didn't really have a platform for this other than staffing agencies, local staffing agencies, Facebook, Google, some of these marketplaces, not Google, sorry, Facebook, Indeed. So they had these old platforms where they could connect. And so our job was to say, what if we had a platform where they could connect to the office's schedule, their appointments and their visits, and had a platform that they could kind of call their work platform. So that's what we're building for them. So we have, 45 customers in Charlotte and a bunch of dental professionals. And we have our beachhead and our launch pad there, and we'll go from there.